Today what we'll do is we'll talk about some examples and our experiences working on beer and alcohol brands, and I'll leave some time at the end and we can have some Q&A. That said, let's meet the panelists. To my left I have Jackie Hernandez. She's a digital strategist at Bravo. Currently she runs the digital and social account for Coors Light for the U.S. Hispanic market in North America. Previously she's worked on Miller Lite for Latin America, and so she knows her beers.
Yeah.
And next we have Andrew Choban. He is the engagement lead for the social studio at Sapient down in Coconut Grove. Works on the Beam Tequila brand, so that's Sauza 901, Hornitos. He's had previous experience with Jose Cuervo and Papas Pilar, a small batch rum, and among other brands. And then I'm Andy. I'm the director of digital and social media strategy at The Community, formerly known as La Comunidad. We specialize in culturally relevant advertising for general market, total market, US Hispanic, and LATAM. I also work with Andrew on those Beam Tequila brands, and previously I've worked on Diageo, Guinness, and Sam Adams beer. But enough about us. Let's talk booze. So we wanted to start by addressing the challenges up front. And for those of you who don't know, the alcohol industry is highly regulated. And that means there's a lot of rules and restrictions on how we actually go to market and advertise. Things like age gating. So whenever we consider new platforms, we have to make sure that we're verifying our consumers are of legal drinking age. Then there's things for like your communication. So you can't do anything that's construed to be marketing towards kids. So you're not going to see a lot of cats on social media advertising for beer or liquor. And anything that's like binge drinking, overconsumption, we have to be very careful with. And then even when you get to the production phase, it's not good enough for your talent to be 21. They have to be 25 or over, just to play it safe. But those are some of the general category challenges. I'd love to hear from you guys. What are some of the challenges you've experienced with your beer and liquor brands?
I can actually give a specific example for the marketing to kids one. This most recent, working for one of the tequila brands. I won't say which one, but we're working towards Halloween content, and we actually had a creative team come up with an idea of creating jack-o'-lanterns out of limes, because obviously limes go with tequila. And they actually carved jack-o'-lanterns into the limes with X-Acto knives and stuffed LEDs in them, and it was really cool. Got it all the way to the client. Client loved it, and then legal killed it because jack-o'-lanterns obviously appeal to children. So that was one most recent out of the examples that Andy shared. But talking more about Papas Pilar here, right now I'm working with the bigger Sauza brands, but I did launch Papas Pilar, which is a small batch rum that, as Andy mentioned, it's a super premium rum. It's actually owned by the Hemingway family. And there's a huge backstory because the rum is actually sourced, it's a blend, it's a premium blend that's sourced from all the places that Hemingway traveled. So this brand really has a robust backstory to it. It's not just a new great tasting rum that came onto the market. It's got this whole family and history behind it. So social media and Facebook timeline specifically, and this was years ago before the algorithms were so tight and stuff like that. We used Facebook timeline to tell this robust backstory of Hemingway's life, Hemingway's travels, to really set up the brand. And we actually launched that brand solely in social media. We didn't have any traditional media along with it. And social media was just a perfect place for it, to be able to tell that story that you can't tell in a 15 or a 30-second spot.
How about you, Jackie? You kind of had a converse experience.
Yeah, so for us, the challenge is a little bit inverse. So the biggest challenge, or one of the biggest challenges right now facing Coors Light and big beer brands overall, right, especially when targeting millennial audience, is the growing popularity of craft beers, right? So, what's been interesting for us is in targeting US Hispanic millennials, there's a unique opportunity there because, you have the first generation US Hispanic millennial that maybe comes from a country where the American beer is the import premium choice. So kind of like there's a different perspective on these American big beer brands. But then you also have the second generation US Hispanic who's a little bit more acculturated and maybe also getting into this kind of craft beer culture, but comes from a tradition where at very key moments in life, be it like the soccer game watching, the party, the gatherings with families and friends, the more important thing is refreshment, right? And lower cost refreshment. And so what's worked for us is finding these key moments for these US Hispanic millennials and making sure that we're present there, that we're present during their game watching experience, that we're present in those passion points of life, you know, gatherings with loved ones, etc. And so that is kind of what geared the thinking behind the Refresca America campaign, right? So the entire concept behind that is, you know, Hispanics refresh America with their culture, their food, their passion and love for sports like soccer, and we refresh them, right? So that's been our angle. That has kind of, it's worked for us so far. So.
Okay, cool. So why don't we talk a little bit about, you know, why we're here, why social media is so great for marketing beer and liquor brands, and, you know, what are some examples of that, and what are some of the strengths that you guys have faced? Andrew?
One thing we've done recently with Salsa is some real-time marketing. So social media really gives you the opportunity to jump into conversation with fans and have that one-on-one communication that you can't have on TV or print or out of home or anywhere else. So we have a few examples here. You have Mexican Independence Day, which was just yesterday, I believe, or the day before, where we were able to do a post. This is actually a cinematograph. You know, congratulating our fans and wishing them a happy Mexican Independence Day from Salsa. And then the other one, actually last week or a week and a half ago, when the whole Tom Brady Deflategate court case came out, we actually jumped in and responded to this. Right now, Salsa is touting a new liquid in their bottles, which is 100% blue agave. So we have this content series where we talk about it being 100% blue agave, and other things that aren't 100% just aren't worth it. So we responded with this, and we have a deflated ball saying, you know, deflating may work for some, but we prefer to be 100%. So that was pretty fun. And the New England fans didn't like it, I can tell you that. Our community manager was pretty busy that day. Tom Brady fans were not happy, but it was fun.
But it started a conversation, right?
Yeah,
That's what social's about. How about you, Jack?
31 other NFL fans liked it.
So interestingly enough, one of our most successful posts to date was when we jumped into the Love Wins conversation. So it was a decision that was made, and primarily because Coors Light is an LGBT-friendly company, right? And more and more studies show that the millennial consumer really appreciates authenticity from brands, and brands that stand up for their values, right? So for us, it was a no-brainer based on that, based on some research that US Hispanics also over-index in support. So, you know, we made the case to the client, and the client was on board, and it blew up. You know, of course, we faced the negative comments, but the positives far outweighed. Fans jumped in and defended us, and they thanked us for the support, for celebrating with them, and it was really cool to see that. And then, of course, another big component for us in real-time marketing is going back to being part of those game time conversations. Right? So, you know, we like to make sure to be part of those game time conversations and part of that game watching experience with the fan, where we know that they're buying our beer and watching the game that they're so passionate about.
So surrounding moments, it's always great. Drinking occasions, good time to keep your brand top of mind, right? Mm-hmm. Cool.
So what's interesting, going back to jumping in on those soccer conversations, right? We've seen, despite our target being a very specific U.S. Hispanic male 18 to 34 target, our posts about female soccer have been the best performing for soccer so far. And it's interesting in two ways. It makes us think a little bit about, well, you know, with the changing culture and millennials and kind of empowered women that are also into sports, etc., should we be considering like an expansion of our target to not be just male focused? But on top of that, another key learning is, you know, the insight that the U.S. Hispanic millennial male is far more feminist than his former generations. So that's been a really cool learning for us.
Very interesting.
Speaking more about Papa's Pilar, which again was a really small rum, and it came with a really small budget. Actually, we went after a very particular consumer from the very beginning. First of all, the rum didn't launch nationally right out of the box. It was a phased launch. It started here in Florida. It's actually bottled down in Key West. It started here in Florida, and then we rolled it out to different states. And the way we chose the states was based on this adventurous lifestyle that Hemingway lived. So we wanted the rum to kind of follow that aura that Hemingway had. And on social, we wanted to make sure we were growing a fan base that wasn't just, you know, a fan base of rum drinkers or a fan base of just anyone. So we really targeted that adventure, the adventure-seeking people. So we went for obviously fishermen, scuba divers, things like that. So there was this added layer of hyper-targeting. So the several layers of targeting obviously were 21 and over, rum drinkers, and then it went geo-targeted. So we went for obviously the places where they could get the rum, so the states that we were launching. And then there was an even tighter level of targeting where we just went for that adventure seeker, hikers, different adventure sports and things like that. So, and that's another thing you can't do with traditional media. You don't have that level of hyper-targeting in traditional media that you do in social.
Great. This guy looks a little familiar right here, huh?
Yeah. Also with small brands, you have to be pretty scrappy in your content collection. So that guy does look familiar.
So we talked about real-time marketing and hyper-targeting, and celebrity is another great strength.
Yeah, so one of the passion points that we're focusing on is music, and there's a big focus on Latin urban music and how it's refreshed the music scene. So we're very close to launching a campaign now with J Balvin. We're sponsoring his music tour, and basically there's only so much I can say about the campaign because it hasn't launched yet, but the entire purpose is to make sure that we're providing a refreshing, exclusive, intimate experience for the fan that only Coors Light can provide in this situation. And so we're exploring new technologies and to make sure that we can make those intimate moments really come to life and be like raw and authentic. So
very cool. And Andrew, you had a whole panel about this, but for those of you who missed it.
Yeah, I'll try to fit that 40 minutes into one slide now. Yeah, this is Salsa 901 and Justin Timberlake. So this is a unique relationship between the liquor and the celebrity. He actually founded the liquor before partnering with Salsa. It was 901 Tequila, which is actually 901 is the area code from where he's from, so Memphis. And he partnered with Salsa to become a part of the Casa Salsa brands, which is the tequila brands for Beam. And we used him. We launched the brand last summer, and we used him in a way where he announced that he was becoming a part of Casa Salsa, and he actually went to Jalisco, Mexico to study the backstory of tequila and things like that. He's actually a tequila connoisseur himself, which is pretty cool. So he actually loves the product. But then what we did this year, and what he did with some very comedic writing and whatnot, was he.
It was like
oh,
you
there you
couldn't drink tequila without hormones. And then the Salsa 901 comes out. It was like it didn't even exist. We got it.
So basically what that is, and that's the super short 15-second version. There was a minute-and-a-half version that really told the whole. It was like this big mockumentary, and it told the story about how smooth this tequila is. You don't need to chase it with a lime, which is pretty unique. Limes obviously that just comes naturally when you take a tequila shot. So we did the opposite. Actually launched this on Cinco de Mayo. And this became a trending topic. It was talked about all over the place. It got a ton of press. And then we followed it up with an apology video from JT to the limes themselves. So he was like apologizing to himself. 'Cause I don't know if you could tell, but that's JT in the spot, but he actually apologized to himself in a follow-up video on YouTube, which is pretty funny and pretty unique. So if you want, you should check that out.
Yeah. I guess it also doesn't hurt when you're celebrities besties with Jimmy Fallon, right?
Yeah, just a week ago, JT actually went on Fallon because JT and Jimmy Fallon actually have obviously a personal relationship outside, and they were together one night apparently, and they infused jalapenos in the tequila, and they were doing drinks. So what JT did was he got his mixologist to go on the show with him and create a drink with the infused jalapeno tequila, and they called it the Fallon. So they actually mixed this drink on the set. It was the same night they also did Hip Hop 6. I'm sure everybody saw that. If you haven't, it's pretty hilarious. So we live tweeted the whole night, what was going on, all the stuff that 901 was involved in, things that 901 wasn't involved in, but we brought 901 into that conversation. And then at the same time, we were responding to all the press and all the love we were getting from fans that night. So it was a pretty exciting night.
So we've talked about some, really cool, strengths of social media, but let's get a little deeper. Like, what are some of your favorite platforms to really get the message out there? Andrew, I think that's you.
Yeah, for me, for liquor, and this is recent because up until not too long ago, you couldn't age gate on Instagram and all that good stuff. That was a challenge, as we talked about earlier. But now liquor brands are starting to adopt Instagram, and it's a unique opportunity because Instagram is very visual. So it's primarily fashion brands, food brands, and things like that. And liquor, with the pretty garnishes and beautiful backdrops and things like that, it gives us the opportunity to put our drinks and our product in these unique scenarios and share it. We actually what you're seeing here is you're seeing the old look and feel for Salsa, and it was very female focused. We just revamped their entire social presence just within the past couple months, and we've moved it to a more all-encompassing target now. So not only are we targeting females, but we're also targeting men. This particular content series here is called #ThatFirstSip. So what this does is it kind of evokes that emotion of anticipation before you take that first sip of a new drink, and it does it quite well. So it puts you in the scenario before you taste something new, and everybody knows that feeling at happy hour or your first drink on vacation. It's so it's transportive. It takes you into that moment, and this is one of those content series that do that.
Yeah, I think it really plays the strengths of Instagram and finding that really cool perspective and repeating it and creating a content series. Another pro tip here is see how, we're doing some branding in here without actually putting the bottle or a logo. So this is a good way to incorporate your brand into an Instagram post without being too overt about it. So that's pretty cool.
So we were presented with an opportunity to be first to market for a test for U.S. Hispanic targeted ads on Instagram for this category. So we don't have a U.S. Hispanic profile on Instagram. It's a general market one, but basically we had the opportunity to launch these. We made sure to use bilingual copy because in case any new followers that were gained through this, they wouldn't be thrown off when they would go back and see the all English profile. So we did the mix in of the bilingual, and basically we used the Refresca content pillar of refreshing your passion and refreshing your world with showing a passion for your city, for the things you love, like music, hanging on to the things you love, which is kind of like the inspirational copy that we referred to with the image with the locks, and kind of also that very urban feel that we're going for with our focus on Latin urban music and urban art and things of that nature. So far it's we've gotten a lot of positive feedback in the comments, and it's really taken off. We have upwards of 40,000 likes on some of these, so it's been a good opportunity.
Killing it with the likes there.
Yeah.
What about other platforms?
So, we know that snackable content is extremely important for the millennial target. It's a target that's highly mobile, that relies heavily on the internet for all their entertainment, and all their content and information. And so finding the right media partners is essential, right, for content marketing. And with BuzzFeed, they've really stepped it up in the past few years for US Hispanic. They went from having a relatively small US Hispanic following to now actually the US Hispanic over indexes by like 115 on BuzzFeed. They have, it's a larger portion of their audience than the non-Hispanic white. So for us, it was a really cool opportunity to again bring in that Refresca lens with content related to how Latinos refresh food, how they refresh parties, how we throw the best parties, how we refresh soccer, and so really connecting with Latinos through humorous content that relates to those content pillars.
Cool. And what about Pinterest?
What we did here, Pinterest, when we revamped the whole social presence, what we did was we took the notion that infographics are something that people are doing a lot with on Pinterest, but we didn't want to just do infographics in the traditional way. So what we did was we actually took infographics into the real world. So we actually shot these recipes in an infographic style, but in the real world. So we have the beautiful garnishes. We have, obviously this one has to be done with a shaker. So you have the shaker and the ice. And then obviously the recipe at the bottom and a link to the rest of our recipes. So we really took the idea of what performs well on Pinterest, and that's infographics, and took it into the real world and took it really to the next level.
So that was some really cool creative. I would call it thumb stopping. So people, if you guys don't know what that means, if you're on your phone and you're going through your feed, if it actually makes you stop your thumb, that's proof that it's working. But what about some emerging platforms? Snapchat is one that people talk about a lot. Live video has been talked about a lot this week. We know Bud Light was one of the first brands to really come out and do a partnership with Snapchat. They did it around stories, around their Whatever USA campaign. It was pretty cool. But we haven't seen a lot, that much, and especially with liquor brands. Have you guys had any experience with emerging platforms, or how are you approaching emerging platforms?
So Snapchat is one of those platforms that we're exploring. I'm of the personal opinion that anybody targeting millennials should be exploring the platform. It just has so much to offer in terms of forms of advertising, anything from like real-time event marketing to, with the Discover feature, content marketing through media partners. For Bud Light and Budweiser, they were able to leverage the live story feature because of a particular partnership deal with Snapchat that allowed them to test the age gate. It hasn't fully rolled out yet, so going back to our challenges with age gating, that's a challenge that we face with activating on Snapchat. But there are workarounds. Basically, you can still open an account as an alcoholic beverage on Snapchat, and basically your stories would only be fed to followers, but there's now, with the Snap code, it's really made it a lot more of a seamless process to get followers, and via incentives and Snap code, making it something like it's such a seamless thing to follow you. It really helps in terms of gathering followers and still being able to take advantage of that opportunity. You can also still leverage local stories. That's also still available for alcohol brands. So, we saw Heineken leverage this with Coachella. So Heineken didn't have this partnership deal that AB InBev did, but they did leverage the local story and their own account, and they drove users to from their other social media platforms to go follow them on Snapchat, and the incentive was they would be sending snaps with clues as to where their VIP sections in different tents were, and the first X amount of followers, or the first person to snap, the first few people to snap back would have VIP access to these exclusive tents from Heineken. So there are workarounds and there are solutions, and those are things that we are currently exploring.
So still kind of testing it out?
So yes. I mean, again, we want to provide those exclusive experiences for fans with certain celebrities, so we'll see what happens.
All right, and then our last topic before we go into questions is, we saw a lot of great creative, but how do we get there? What's that process like? I'd love to hear both of you guys talk a little bit about that process.
The styles of pieces you actually saw were they're all shot in the real world. So what we do is obviously it starts with a very high brand strategic brief that tells you what the story is you're going to tell with that content. And then it gets drilled down one level deeper to a monthly like cultural brief is what we call it, which we talk about with our creative teams what we want to say that month. So if it's October, we're going to talk about Halloween, things like that. Back in August and September, we were talking about back to school. Well, not liquor brands, we were talking about back to school, but other brands we were talking about back to school. Moving into the holidays, we were talking about Christmas, things like that, New Year's, and then we actually get to the production phase. So we have these. That first sip series where we actually took people, gave them new drinks, gave them real drinks, and we shot them in perspective. We had these cool camera setups and everything, and we'd have them. One of them actually is Andy. He's one of our hand models.
Hand model, part-time.
Hand model part-time. Again, being scrappy. And we actually shoot these in real world, and especially for Instagram, you want it to look as real as possible, not as much post-pro as other content. Or other platforms would require, because you want it to look real. People sniff out Photoshop really quick and call you out on it, so you don't want to do that.
How about you, Jackie? What's your process to get to creative?
So, actually, we're currently, in social you have to be nimble, right? And always have that evergreen content to resort back to, right? So right now we just got a shipment of all this Coors Light merchandise, and we're working on a brief for creatives for a photo shoot and video shoot with the new Viz ID, because that's another thing. Coors Light recently changed to a new visual ID, so we're having to revamp our look and feel on everything, and we want to make sure to have content readily available with a new look and feel. And so that's very important, right? Creating these kind of banks of really engaging content that we develop with a very specific brief. That our brief right now focuses on several things. We look at what has been the best performing just in the month prior, because everything's constantly changing month to month, right? And also, what are some of the competitive examples that we really like? So every month we present the brief not just with our priorities and the dates that we're looking at, but also with this kind of brief analysis aside from our regular reporting that provides a snapshot at what's like the most recent thing that's been doing really well and what's been doing well for our competitors. So.
All right. So that leaves us with Q&A, guys. Please let us know what you guys have questions about or your answer. Anybody?
Can you talk a little bit about how you work with maybe your TV team or other people at the agency by other mediums, as far as like, is it the same, is it different? Like, does it matter on the specific campaign? Is there like rule of thumbs that you guys have when it comes to like mixing the TV and social campaigns?
Well, I think for us, one of the big things has been to challenge creatives to when they're coming up with a concept for a campaign, to not necessarily always think TV first. So, there seems to sometimes be a notion in the industry that big ideas start with TV and then digital is just the supporting material. So I think the biggest challenge that all of us, I'm sure, at different agencies and digital departments face is making sure that creatives understand that that's not the case, that big ideas can start with digital and feed the rest of the creative of a campaign. So depending on your target, especially if you're targeting millennials, that's definitely something that you should be considering, because they're definitely online more than they are on TV. So.
Yeah, I think the right way to approach it is to think about what's that like brand strategy overall, big idea, and then figure out how that comes to life in different channels, and not just go TV first and then let's just cut it up and put it into social, because that isn't ideal. Any other questions? The answer there.
So I guess this type of group brands create a lot of contests as well. So what would you say is the best platform to create like a contest in order to maximize like use or like participate? Do you have like a favorite platform in order to create contests for this type of brand?
Question?
Contests are pretty challenging with liquor brands. One of the legal issues is the liquor itself can never actually be given out or a prize, right? So it would have to be swag or other things like that. There's other workarounds to it. But so doing contests with liquor brands is first of all just a challenge in itself. But I mean, again, it comes down to what your goals are, right? If it's a local event that you're doing a contest for or at, obviously geo-targeting comes into play. So you would use the channels that geo-target better, like Facebook or Twitter, obviously. If it's a more national campaign where you're trying to get a big conversation going, it would be hashtags on Twitter, like a hashtag campaign, things like that. So it would all depend on what the level of the contest is and what channel you would use. Facebook, obviously, that's usually where most brands have their highest following, so you can get your most reach if you have enough paid media to support it. So it really depends on that contest. But each channel has its own benefits.
I have a question regarding sequencing and storytelling, and the challenge is the covers, making sure that the story and the concept has one, longevity, and two, that it can branch out into multiple channels. Like for the example, the tequila story that was so smooth and had to chase up the line. How do you know that when you come up with that concept and you're pitching it to a client, that it does have that staying power? And even if it doesn't, you can react with it, like depending on the responses from the audience and consumers, you can kind of change the storyline and kind of continue to let that brand grow and the voice until it continue to grow. How do you, as creatives, deal with that? Because I know it's pretty challenging.
Yeah. Well, what we did with the No Limes Needed campaign specifically, since that's the one you cited, we actually targeted people that saw the spot on TV with the second ad. So you saw the spot on TV, which was No Limes Needed, and that mockumentary that Andy showed the clip from. But then we followed up with the rest of the story, which was the apology video with Twitter TV targeting. So you saw both, like people that saw that spot were also targeted with the YouTube video. And then also what we did was we housed everything on the 901.com site where you could see the full story. So you saw that video, then you saw the apology, and then it linked you out to the Tumblr page where you could see more content as well, that just continued that story. So that's kind of how we told that story over time.
But I think it is a large challenge on social media, especially because of organic reach being basically zero. You can't rely that you're going to be hitting that same person with like a new message on a regular basis. So one of the things I recommend is to make sure that your piece of content can live on its own. Whenever it can be taken in its own, that's the best, because then you don't rely on somebody coming back to you, unless you can continually hit that person with that that story. And then always driving them to a larger destination, then they can kind of explore more and find out more.
How do you then live on its own?
So basically, each post should tell a story in that one post, basically. So for like No Limes Needed, right, we had to kind of explain.
Yeah, each piece of content kind of has to. You can't rely on other pieces of content to tell the rest of the story because it has to make sense on its own, right? So if it's with the hashtag, right, just the hashtag alone, No Limes Needed, kind of makes the rest of the content make sense when you're talking about the smoothness of the tequila, or this lime who's now homeless and upset because he's homeless or jobless or whatever. So that, the hashtag really told the story, and then the piece of content told more of the story, the image or the GIF or the video or whatever. And that's a huge challenge for creatives. And when we're briefing creatives, we're always, like Andy said, saying, okay, you're going to tell a big story, but then each micro piece of content or each micro content has to tell its own story on its own too. So you have two layers there. And it's a huge challenge in social. And then the volume of content they're cranking out, and each one has to tell its own story and a larger story. It's definitely a challenge. Yeah. But they do it.
Well, I think things like hashtags really help pull it together.
Yeah.
Can you give tips on how you can get better at doing that? Because I'm a copywriter, but also studying photography and videography, so I'm really into the storytelling.
do it over and over and over again. Because on top of that, not only are you telling each piece of content has to tell its own story, but then you have character limits and 20% rule and all this other stuff that hinders you even more. So it's just practice and you know, if you gotta write 5 lines, don't write 5 lines, write 100. That's just the only way to do it.
Well, I think also it's like trying to be consistent and coherent across your whole network. So you have to have like a brand story and tie it together with a hashtag, but then all the visuals need to kind of match that story, so your cover photos are the same or similar, and everything, everywhere you go, like every touch point you go, tells that same sort of story. And anytime you match copy to the visual and you know, that's kind of what I would say.
And use your learnings too. Insights are important, like making sure that you're looking into how your content is performing constantly. You know, sometimes you put out a piece of creative that to you makes sense, and then you realize, well, people didn't really get it, like the full concept. They didn't, maybe I relied too much because you're so close to it that you get it. But just from listening how your audience reacts, you know, you take those learnings and then you optimize your next piece of creative based on that.
Yeah, comments are keys to Jackie's point.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, if you get a ton of WTFs, it didn't work. You know, so do it better next time. So that's your learning right there.
Yeah.
Are all the results of the social media campaigns based on how many people you can reach in brand awareness? Or you have any specific call to action? I mean, I know when you try to take them to a website or to do certain behavior, but you don't really know how much beer you sold because of that ad that you placed on social media or that campaign that you're developing. So the question is, what do you show the client? What do you just the people that you reach? Is that it's all about the brand awareness that you're creating?
So I would say it really depends on each brand, because each brand has different objectives. I think 901, for example, is one that really wants to generate buzz and compare itself to other celebrity-owned spirits. So they compare themselves to Ciroc or the George Clooney tequila and things like that. So their goal is to generate awareness compared to those, so share a voice in that territory. So that's one of the measures. And then I think because of this organic reach, you know, going away thing, the awareness is one of the big things that is driving a lot of it. And what I would say is that social media is not just about pushing cases, but it's about building a brand. So at the end of the day, if somebody says this is the tequila for me or this is the beer for me because of your advertising, that's success. And it is going to be a little hard to measure it by, you know, cases sold. But that's why we do a lot of marketing towards like key moments and drinking occasions to keep our brand top of mind, so that when they do go to the store or the bar, they're asking for our brand.
Thank you. On that note, is there any advice you could give us on managing client expectations when they come up to you with a social media campaign that they want to do?
Yeah, I mean that's huge. I mean, when you can't tie it right back to sales, it's tough. And you know, there are ways, there's brand health metrics and things like that, and studies and surveys you can have done that help show upticks in brand health and things like that online. But those in themselves are expensive and hard to get a client to do. So, you know, a lot of time it's qualitative analysis and showing the conversation that's happening, showing that brands are choosing to engage with the brand, or fans are choosing to engage with that brand and not just, you know, keep on scrolling. It's the thumb stopping thing, like Andy said. You know, you're looking at such a high volume of content, any given user on a daily basis. For you to stop on like a brand post and look at it and watch a video or even click like, or to the next step, actually comment or share on it, that's the value you have to show the client and show them, look, this is working. This person actually took a few seconds out of their day and didn't look at their best friend's kid. They actually engaged with your piece of content instead. So, you know, so that's really how it's sold.
Poor kid.
Yeah, poor kid.
I think it's also important to encourage your client to be bold, right? Like social media at the end of the day is all about testing and learning. So you can't be afraid to experiment with new technologies, with new approaches to your content with new partnerships, and it's the nature, it's the key to succeeding in social media. It's kind of taking that leap, learning from it. It's so quick and nimble that it's first of all, it's relatively easy to recover from things, and it's quick, it's easy, it's really quick to learn from it, to like learn from, hey, is this working, is it not, how do I optimize it, how do I fix it? So I think it's important to encourage your client to be open to that.
Yeah, and I would just say education is key. Just keep educating them. That really helps. And other things are like, showing your brand compared to competitors really helps. And, brand managers usually react to those sort of things. If you're not on it, somebody else is, you're losing out on an opportunity. And there are more and more ways to test. I know if you do an Instagram buy of a certain amount, you can get a Nielsen brand effect study, which offers you 3 questions, and you can serve it up to an audience that saw your ad to see if they're willing to buy your product or not. So you can kind of extrapolate intent to purchase, perhaps. There are some ways.
Do you have any data on how those efforts translate to sales numbers? Does the client share those with you?
I mean, there's ways to tie it directly to sales. It's hard to do on like a larger scale. Like you can do one post and have it drive traffic to somewhere where you can buy the product, and that one post you'll be able to show its effectiveness. But as a whole, it's a lot harder. So in order to tie something directly to sales and data, it would have to be on a post per post basis or tweet by tweet basis, and then you track the traffic coming from there to where they can actually purchase the purchase point.
Yeah, I would say it's hard to
Intent to
silo
purchase.
out
Right.
social media from all the communication. So it's hard to prove that that is the only thing. And also because we're not an e-commerce type of industry, so it's not like you can track links. But I know that Jim Beam has some brands that have online, it's called Reserve Bar, so that you can track. But overall, it's something that I think the whole industry is trying to work on.
And I mean, I think you can also use just consumer insights too in terms of like behavior. So like even though it's a little difficult to get to those numbers of the end result and whether social media, we do have a lot of insights on the behavior of the target and like how much they are consuming online, how much they are, like how they are interacting with brands online. So you kind of use that consumer behavior to also dictate how you communicate to the consumer. How would be the most effective way to get that purchase intent, right? So.
I had a conversation with Ken Roberts at a P&G conference a couple months ago, and I asked him a question about how do you tackle the challenge where a brand, like a big brand, has like smaller brands, but the messages and the stories and the concepts and the content that you're pushing out are contradictory to each other. For example, Unilever, the Dove campaigns, and then the Axe commercials. And his response was, I just really work with that brand. But he's in a position where he can do that. So my question is, for creatives, where you're not in that kind of position where you can just sign off a brand and sign off with a business, how do you deal with that?
I think it's just a matter of separating the stories, right? And consumers don't really see the overall connection. I mean, with P&G, it's obviously a different story because everybody knows P&G has so many different fingers, and you used to work for P&G, right?
Yeah.
So, for us, and I think Andy could probably answer the P&G question a little better than me, but like for, say, a Beam that we have, we have these different tequilas, and one is targeted towards women, one's targeted towards men, the other one's targeted towards millennials. They're just all telling that unique story, and your fans and your target are following the brand that they relate to most, and you hope that that's the story that they're gravitating to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many people actually know all the brands under P&G and under Unilever. Usually it's the activists that speak out the most when one brand is acting, crazy, and there's other brands that are contradictory. So, I haven't experienced, issues with that too much beyond that kind of like outspoken activists.
So Coors Light, right, is part of Miller Coors, right? So under the same company is Miller Lite, is Blue Moon, is Red's Apple Ale, and all of them are targeted very differently and tell very different stories. And to Andy's point, most people don't know. I mean, maybe people know Miller Lite and Coors Light are part of the same company, but a lot of people don't know that Blue Moon is also part of that company, and that Red's Apple Ale, which targets females, is part of that company. So yeah, I think it's just making sure that even though they're under the same company, they're each their own brand. So making sure that you stay true to that brand voice.
All right. I think we covered. Thank you guys.